Good morning. I'm Sandy Frank, and I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Lee County. I'd like to welcome you to this educational event, which is, and thank you for spending Saturday morning with us. League educational events are one of the ways that we work to increase understanding of public policy issues and to engage citizens in decisions that impact their lives. Our speaker, Lori Laird, today will touch on a number of issues that are important to the League of Women Voters and especially to those of us in Lee County. These include affordable housing, sustainability, and government leadership and coordination. Before we get started with our program, I would like to do a few housekeeping things. For those of you who are on Zoom, please stay on mute and put your comments and questions in the chat. For those in person, please put your questions on the index cards that are spread around, and we do have more if you have more questions than one. And if there's anything that comes up, please raise your hand. And we have a full program today, but before we start, I would like to remind everyone that affordable, attainable, and sustainable housing continues to be a critical need in Lee County. And the League of Women Voters believes that every family deserves a decent home and a suitable living environment. So the League supports governing that provides leadership and coordination to solve economic and social issues, such as affordable housing, and assures that needed services are available to all citizens. We encourage all of you here today to learn from the presentations, to share with us your concerns, and to work with us to further our education and advocacy efforts for affordable housing and sustainability in Lee County. Before we start the program, I would like to take a moment to go around the room and introduce some of our League leaders. We have a number here today. Sitting in the front, we have Stacia Arcarice, who actually is filling two positions for us. She's First Vice President and Secretary. On Zoom, I think we have Clara Ann Graham, who is currently leader for environment, and Adrian Kaltman for climate. You probably met Anna Callwood at the registration table. She is our treasurer. And Jerry Ware, who is our voter registration and community ambassador, is not here today. So I will talk to you in a minute about some of the voter registration issues. Willie Middleton is our coordinator for returning citizens for rights restoration. And Willie, do you want to say anything about your programs?
We'll be looking for volunteers, so keep your eye on the email. Start over. Good morning. I just want to say, that they're finally coming up with what they're going to do with the restoring rights and on our postcarding program. So please keep your eye out on emails so that we do need volunteers for writing these postcards and everything. So we will be asking for that pretty soon. So thanks.
Thank you. We have two leaders working on health. Dana Clark, who's been working on reproductive health, including a new initiative we have with period poverty. And is Dana in here today? Okay, she was at the registration table. And Lorna Washington, you want to raise your hand, who is a director for health as well. Education, Betsy Vaughn, we've been working on some, I didn't see Betsy, did she get in here? Okay, so we've been working on some education issues, including what's happening to immigrants in the schools and school choice. The issue of vouchers is a huge issue. School vouchers for private education is a huge issue in Lee County as well as for the state. Affordable housing, Lana Cowell and a committee. Do you have anything you wanted to say today, Lana? She's been involved in a number of affordable housing issues.
Now, we do have a number of projects that we are trying to stay on top of around the county and make sure that these projects that are resulting from Ian and the money that was given to us as a result of Ian, to make sure that the affordable housing units that are supposed to be built are actually built. So we're just trying to make sure we keep our eyes on that, because I'm very questioning as to whether they're going to actually happen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dana Clark. I'm with Reproductive Rights. We are meeting with a coalition from NOW, National Organization for Women, to set up educational experiences in communities and schools to work on educating reproductive rights. So I have had three meetings, and I did a volunteer experience with them up in the Dunbar Library, working on gathering products for women who need things such as, it's called period poverty. And I had never heard that term used before. So it was very enlightening to me. And we filled 81 bags of equipment, and we're going to be working with them in the next couple of months as in a coalition to do that.
Thank you. Anyone who would like to work with Dana, please let her know. It's a very important initiative. Our Director for Economic and Social Justice, Jacqueline McMiller, I think is going to join us. She's not here at the moment. Nancy Leverance is a director who is our event coordinator and also is coordinating our youth initiative, which is an opportunity for all of us to try to reach out to younger people and get them involved in the league and to get them involved in issues that affect their lives. I'd like to thank Eddie Stahl, who's doing our Zoom and technical support and is making our lives much easier by helping us to coordinate that. And Sue Osen, who is the Observer Corps coordinator. Thank you for those of you who do observe government agencies and report on that. And if anyone else would like to give us information on what's happening with local government entities, we do pay attention to what the issues are, and that helps us to target our advocacy efforts and educational initiatives. And finally, Judy Alves, who is a longtime leader of the league and has joined us again to coordinate in working with Lana Cowell on a judiciary study that we will be discussing at our April meeting. So for those of you who are members, our April meeting will be for members only. Those of you who are not members, we'd love for you to join, but we will be having our annual business meeting in April, as well as doing our discussion and consensus on the federal judiciary study. The league develops positions based on study and research and member consensus and member support. And this is the first national initiative in a while. We're looking at the federal judiciary. So it's very important that all of us contribute to the development of that position. Before I turn this over, I'd just like to remind you, if you haven't, please register to vote. If you haven't renewed your vote by mail, please do that as well. You need to do that for the next election, even if you had vote by mail for the November election. And we have petitions that we're supporting, the right to clean water and Medicaid expansion in Florida, both very important issues. And we are going into the legislative session where the league will be supporting voting rights and election reform, including revisions for write-in candidates, rights restoration for returning citizens, and we hope an issue that's very important to Lee County, and that will be a proposal to have single-member districts for the Lee County commissioners. We're also looking at, the State League is looking at education issues, reproductive health and justice, and gun violence prevention. So again, I encourage all of you to participate with the league in partnership with us as members, any way that we can work together. And with that, I would like to introduce our second vice president, who also coordinates our environmental efforts and works on affordable housing, Marcia Ellis, who will introduce the speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Good morning to everyone who has come out to learn more about this really important topic, the community rating system and the nexus with the National Flood Insurance Program. And we are privileged to have an excellent speaker, Lori Lair, who will be explaining how community-wide reductions in flood insurance are achieved. we all have our personal journeys, and my personal journey after Hurricane Ian included trying to find some information that I thought could help me be more resilient and to understand how our community can be more resilient. And in those efforts, I came across the community rating system. It didn't take long, in making a few phone calls around town, speaking to different folks in government to learn about Lori Lair, who she has an incredible reputation of being someone who is a top-notch expert that delivers results for community. And those results save residents money on their flood insurance. Also helps mitigate the risk that are associated with disasters and flooding in particular in communities. And it helps us all better prepare as part of the CRS umbrella. And so to introduce her, I just want to really briefly share some testimonials that folks have written about Lori. And I'm going to start with this one. I first worked with Lori when we were CRS instructors at the Emergency Management Institute. It was great to work with someone who not only knows her stuff, but is an excellent instructor. And in learning more about Lori, I've realized that she is the person who is educating others and sharing her knowledge. Let me go on to say that the League's position in terms of our mission includes that there be citizen participation and science-informed decision-making. And on that note, I will just say that the efforts that Lori has put into educating folks about the community rating system, it's so welcome to know that she is in our presence today. Now I'm going to jump to our own floodplain manager, Billy Jacoby, who commented, Lori has a way of breaking down the more complex components and requirements of the CRS to be more digestible for her client. Her excellent communication skills, methodical practices, and her endless supply of patience produce excellent results. And what do these results look like? Well, let's talk about Monroe County, Florida. That's Key West. Key West. Yes, it is. Lori Lair brought Monroe County from being a community in bad standing with FEMA to a Class 3 community rating system community. And there is a 5% reduction with each class that she helps communities achieve. And that is amazing when you think about Key West and all of the vulnerabilities that that community has, that Lori was able to guide that community to get, let me see, is that a 35% reduction for the community on their flood insurance cost? You, okay, thank you, Lori, for clarifying that. So what Lori clarified was that this is in relation to unincorporated Monroe County. And we understand those relationships of municipalities in unincorporated areas because we also experience that here. I can hardly wait to hear what she has got to share with us today so that we can be partners with our community, with our leaders, to ensure that we're getting those maximum reductions in flood insurance and we are rebuilding and doing things in our community that support our resiliency. So let's give her a big welcome. Thank you. Lori? Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm excited to be here, and I don't believe that I've ever had an introduction that was quite as much on point as far as what I love to do, which is talking about the CRS program and educating people on the CRS program. In that arena is where I live. It's where I have worked. People call it all kinds of things, geeky, other things that you might want to call it. I get stuck in my lane of the community rating system. And just a little history so you know where I came from. I was a floodplain administrator at the city of St. Petersburg. I was handed the CRS manual, like many of the communities, their CRS coordinator has many other duties as assigned. It was back in the day, not a position like you all are fortunate to have here in Lee County. It was just an other hat that a plans examiner or someone else might be wearing. So I started out in local government. I soon learned that I needed to go to the Emergency Management Institute often, even in the snow, to learn everything. As a Floridian born in St. Petersburg, that was a huge leap. But learn everything I could about floodplain management, grant writing, the CRS program. And so we took the good old boy system in St. Petersburg and we turned it around to be compliant with the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and also to advance in the CRS program. I loved it. I fell in love with it. Actually, my auditor for the CRS program is who actually, I said to him when he came, I said, I want to be you one day. And not too much longer, I was offered an opportunity to take his position in the state of Florida. So I worked as an auditor, or it's called a specialist, but for the insurance rating or insurance office, ISO, Insurance Office Services. I am stumbling on that. Anyway, I work for this company. It's now called VeraRisk, and I was the auditor around, for most of my territory was Florida. So that's how I know most of the communities in Florida. But I work nationally as the lead trainer. So I spent a lot more time at the Emergency Management Institute in Maryland. And I also traveled all over the country with French Wetmore, who actually wrote the original program for the CRS program. And we traveled and we taught communities how to participate in the program. So I have been doing this my entire career. I am a certified floodplain manager, and my number is less than 100. So if that tells you how long I've been doing this, it's the program started in 1990, the CRS program. The CFM came around 96-ish, and I got my CFM in 98. So I've been doing this a while, and that's why some of this has stuck in my brain. It's like second nature to me. So with that, we will talk about the CRS program. I am a consultant to Lee County. I just want to be clear. I have been for years. They were one of my territory back when John Wilson was here. So what I tell you today is independent from anybody that I contract with. It's my opinion. It is how I talk about the CRS program. So I just want to be clear that I'm not necessarily here on behalf of Lee County, although I do know a lot about the struggles that have happened in Lee County post-Ian, both personally. I was in the middle of building a home out on Pine Island. It's the first time I've personally been affected. Even though I worked post-disaster Irma, it didn't affect me personally. So I now live in Lee County, and I finally finished my house. So I am thrilled to be here in Lee County as a resident now in Lee County. So I'm thrilled to be here. And certainly I hope you guys use me as a resource going forward, because I have always been very open to answering questions. Marcia calls me, I take a call, and I will answer questions about the CRS program all day long. So we can advance to the next slide. What is the community rating system? How many of you know about it? You've heard about it. You're somewhat familiar with what happens with it. Okay, awesome. I love that we have both people who know about it and people who don't. I try to teach to, let's simplify this and let's make it easy for us to understand. So let's talk a little bit about what the community rating system is. So it is an incentive program, and it absolutely is voluntary. So if you live in a community that participates in this program, they have done it voluntarily, and the dollars that they spend either on private consulting, their full-time CRS coordinator, which you have in Lee County, your local governments pay for all that. They foot the bill for that. There is no money coming into your local government to help them participate in this program. So kudos to every community that participates in the program. It is voluntary. And it does encourage exceeding the minimum National Flood Insurance Program regulatory standards. So part of this initiative is let's do better. But in the state of Florida, we also have the Florida Building Code that helps us with that, because they follow the ICC code, but they are of the opinion that floodplain management is very important. And not most recently, it's been quite a number of years ago, the Florida Building Code adopted additional height requirements for building, because they have also seen a need to exceed the minimum NFIP standard. So everybody's kind of getting on that bandwagon. And the kind of carrot for communities to do this is that their citizens, not the community, but their citizens, receive a discount on their flood insurance policies. Now, is that a win-win? That's a win-win. Your government is doing something for you that puts money back in your pocket. It's money you don't have to spend. Yes. Yes, sure. So are all flood insurance policies handled by the National Flood Insurance Program, and is there an opportunity for private flood insurance? There is an opportunity for, and I'm not an insurance agent, but what I am told, I do chair the FFMA CRS committee, and we do have quite a few members that are insurance agents. So if any of you are out here, we'd love to hear from you too. Yes, there is private, but they're not taking the big risk policies. They assess the risk. And so if you are at risk, like many of us are, then your only option is the National Flood Insurance Program, because it has to be offered to everyone. Well, I say that. There are some exclusions now. There are some exclusions. We don't have time to go into that, but there are some structures that are no longer insurable through the NFIP. They're nothing you have to worry about, but that is something that now is problematic. If they're repeat offenders of flooding and they've been given, had their house paid for many, many times, there's going to come a time where they're going to say, look, we just need to do something to permanently mitigate. But private insurance, no matter who I talk to about it, is not really grabbing hold in the state of Florida. It's too much risk. Okay. Next slide. So again, this is CRS Communities. The goal of this program, of the community rating system, is to discount insurance because you're reducing risk. So it's not to discount insurance. It's to reduce risk so insurance can be discounted. We often get that backwards, but that is the goal of the program. Go ahead. So we avoid flood damage on insurable properties. That's what the whole goal of this program is. It is an insurance-based program. It is run by the National Flood Insurance Program. It's part of it. So we talk insurance and reduction in insurance. And of course, the woes of the National Flood Insurance Program. It's been in the red for a really long time because we keep having these flooding disasters. So we really need to become more resilient so that we can continue to have insurance. And we're not sure what that's going to look like, whether we're going to have to retreat with all the other climate things that we have going on, but we really do need to start looking at that. And strengthen and support the aspects of the NFIP. That's exactly what I was just talking about. We have to find a way to be able to continue to insure buildings at risk. And maybe that's build them better in place, or maybe that's let's move out of certain areas. What does that look like? But this program encourages communities to have to face those questions. All right, and comprehensive floodplain management. That is also something coming up through the floodplain management ranks like I have through the years. We tend to, in government, we tend to compartmentalize what we do. That's not my job, that's her job. I'm a planner, I'm a buildings plans examiner, I am an inspector, this is my lane. The CRS program covers all of those lanes. You can get credit for things that people are doing in the emergency management, what your inspectors are doing, what your plans examiner, what your electeds are electing to do, how you're regulating, what higher standards you put in your regulations. Those people then all have to work together to document what you're doing to be able to participate in the flood insurance program. So people who didn't know in the community, why do I have to learn about the National Flood Insurance Program? Why do I have to know about floodplain management? Well, because you live in a flood prone area and we participate in the CRS program, and you have to help us earn these points because what you do is worth credit, and that means money in people's pockets. So that is how I see the CRS program bringing community or bringing different departments together to work together, so everyone knows what floodplain management is. So the goal of the community rating system, again, is to support the National Flood Insurance Program. So we want to make flood insurance affordable. Now, we know what happened with risk rating 2.0. Insurance has gotten super high because it's risk-based, and we are faced with many risks, and we do not know yet, because of the lack of transparency with the engine that runs risk rating 2.0, transparency, how it runs, what risk it takes into account, why our insurance policies in some communities are so high. I do know that Pinellas County and Monroe County are two areas that FEMA is having to go back and look at to see, did we run double jeopardy because these insurance rates are so fantastically high. And nothing that you can do as a homeowner or a property owner are going to bring those rates down. The only thing that can help you with a rate is if the community that you live in participates in the CRS program, and then you can look at some of those discounts. So this slide I may need to update about the affordable flood insurance, and then reducing the cost of disaster, because that's really what it's all about, right? If you're not insured, or even if you are insured, we can't keep expecting the federal government to pull us out of these disasters. We have to become more related to flooding. I'm just talking about flooding. So we want to be able to build and do things so that we're not continuing to have to be rescued out of flood disaster events. And then again, I kind of was ahead of myself, but taking action locally in your floodplain management to be able to contribute to those efforts of being more resilient. Okay, we're ready. So the National Flood Insurance Program, how do we do this? How do we get this discount? Let's talk about that for a moment. And the benefits of the CRS program. You're really good at this. I think I need to take you everywhere with me. I don't have to keep punching the button. I love it. So money stays in your community. We already talked about that. This is the only thing that's going to offset your flood insurance costs. It really is. So if your community participates in the CRS program, you will show up on your deck page. Doesn't look exactly like it used to, and it's still very confusing, but there still is a discount there. Improvement, again, within the organization for programs. The CRS specialists, the people who work for Verisk, they're amazing individuals, and they are here to support communities to do well in the program. They are also in the state of Florida. So in the state of Florida, there have always been 3 ISO specialists, Verisk specialists, that work with the communities on participating in the CRS program. Every other specialist in the nation, and there are only about 25 of them, it's a very niche thing, cover multiple states. And we have 3 in the state of Florida. That's the only place that happens. So we are very densely populated with CRS communities. Okay. We also want to build consistency with public information. How many of you see one message coming out of local government, and then you go to another page or another branch of the government, and the message that you receive isn't the same? In fact, it might even be contrary. So the CRS program encourages communities to message consistently, and there are credits under the CRS program for planning to have messages be consistent. And if you can imagine, again, talking about having to bring different departments together. When you have emergency management, their message might be some one thing that's important to them, but your floodplain manager might have some messages that they need to get out as well. Maybe planning does. There's lots of different areas that need to talk about resiliency and how to build and those kinds of things. So the CRS program encourages that consistency. And the communities, and we'll talk about this in a minute, they have to ante up and prove their participation annually to the specialists. So this is not a plan that they write and put on the shelf and pull it down the next time they need it. They have to report in of their activities every single year. And community pride. So I bet you're going to be more proud of your community after you leave here today, learning what they're doing for you in your flood insurance and all the things they have to do to keep this program running. And let me tell you that in Monroe County, and I'm glad you brought this up because I don't often go back to Monroe County and bring it up, but since you did, I'm going to take the liberty to. Monroe County, when I first got there, in 2015, I'll tell you a funny story. So Key West, I did fly into Key West, and I get off in my pencil skirt and my jacket, and I walk down the stairs because you have to walk downstairs in Key West. There is no plank that you can walk. I arrive at a building department, and Christine Hurley, who had audited one of my classes, she was the county administrator there, and she was like, we don't dress like that here. I was like, okay, rule number one. You don't wear your black suit to work in Monroe County. But so we worked to get them in good standing and get a letter of good standing so we could be in the CRS program. We worked tirelessly. We worked through Hurricane Ian, not Ian, it was Irma. We had a plan. Irma disrailed us. We kept working. We became a Class 5 1 month after hurricane hit. We were working. Everybody was working together. We finally, we were going for a Class 4. We overshot it. We got a 3, and we were super thrilled about that. And the electeds were super thrilled about that. And they held a whole one of their meetings, their BOCC meetings, to acknowledge the folks who worked on the CRS program and on the NFIP compliance side. There was not even standing room, and it was the staff who came to be acknowledged for their part in getting Monroe County where they got, which was to a CRS. It took a village. It took standing room only in the BOCC room to bring that to fruition. So they are proud, right down to the staff person intaking permits, of their participation in the CRS program. Okay, so that was my soapbox for Monroe. So joining the CRS program, how do we do that? First of all, your very communities are if they raise their hand and say we're ready to join, the ISO specialists and the hoops that they have to jump through for proving they're in full compliance, get those wheels turning. It's a very welcoming kind of, yes, let's get you to where you need to be in the program. This is super important that you take note of the letter of good standing from the National Flood Insurance Program. So in order to participate in the program, you have to be in full compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program's regulations. And FEMA or the state, because we are a managing state, so we have a whole NFIP office up in Tallahassee, in FDEM, the Florida Department of Emergency Management. They were a managing state, so they can do what they call a community assistance visit. So FEMA or the state comes in and they do field tours, they look at permitting records, they look at all kinds of things, and they decide if your community can participate in the CRS program because they're in full compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. So that is the first hurdle that a community has to get over in order to be in the CRS program. That we're going to come back to. So remember, that is the first step. And then your CEO would write a letter of interest to the Veris folks, and they would say, we have this letter of good standing from FEMA, and we're interested in joining the CRS program. So those are the first two steps. And then you have to score at least 500 points in the CRS program to come in to the program. Now, that's a simplified version of how you come into the program. We talk about points a lot, but with every, and we do not have, you'd have to come for a whole day for me to tell you how this works. But for every class that you participate, for every class that you achieve in the program, there are prerequisites to participation in that class. So there are other things that communities need to do in order to be in the program. But you have to know that you're going to at least be able to get 500 points to even start this process. Okay, so what are the requirements then for participating in the program? So we have to have a designated CRS coordinator. Now, that doesn't mean a coordinator that their only job is the CRS program, but they have to, your community must name a CRS coordinator. You have to implement the CRS activities. Implement or document the CRS activities that can be credited in your community. So many times communities are already doing many things that can be credited under the program. It's just we have to document that we're doing. And it is a federal program, even though we have the Paper Reduction Acts and all those other things, it is still document laden. So it still takes a lot of time and effort. Thank goodness now we're not paper. I used to have like 10 filing cabinets to hold all the paper, but now we're all electronic, so that's a good thing. We have to maintain records. In the National Flood Insurance Program, we have a records destruction kind of law here in the state of Florida. We're under the Sunshine Law. And then we destroy records, and then we say, okay, we're no longer responsible for those records. That does not happen in floodplain management. Floodplain, if you are in the NFIP, if you're in the CRS, then you must retain those records forever as far as FEMA is concerned. Yes, sir. So a community is an incorporated community. No, an HOA could not be a community. I'm sorry. So it's tribal nations can be a community, but it's typically those who can participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which would be an incorporated community, like unincorporated Monroe County, all the municipalities within the county. Yes. Governmental agencies. Yes, sir. Does a tribal nation fall into a governmental agency? I'm curious now that you said that. I'm not sure. Yes. Okay. The state. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So there you go. I've never worked with a tribal community, so I'm not as familiar with that. Not here in the state of Florida. Okay. So we're going to maintain records, and then we are going to, like I said, every year. Yes.
What you said is that the county or government institution is a member of CRS. What we need to know is our HMO a member as regarding the rates on our insurance? So
Their HOA.
HOA, yeah.
Yeah. So if your HOA, and if I'm not understanding the question correctly, just let me know. If your HOA is within, say, Bonita Springs, then you benefit from whatever the class and insurance reduction is in Bonita Springs. Or if your HOA is in, that's why it is in unincorporated Lee County, then you would benefit from Lee County's participation in the CRS program. But you cannot join as an HOA.
What's right now, very important to us, is that our HOA is recommending that we, as an individual, not as an HOA, take out flood insurance
Take out flood insurance?
as an individual versus an HOA.
Okay, so then that would get us down the little bit of a rabbit trail of, is it a condo building? Is it individual, single family? What is in your area? Assume both? Okay, so the condo structures would have an umbrella type of policy, and then they would need to buy individual policies for the interior of their condos. Individual homeowners, single family homes, townhouses and things like that, those are individual policies that you would buy for those kinds of buildings. So it depends. Is your HOA, what kind of insurance are they trying to, so they're trying to get you to buy insurance as an individual homeowner under your HOA and make that a requirement? Oh, wow. Interesting. I've not heard that before. And you have a say in that? I mean, you're voting HOA and you can decide on that or not. So to live there, you'd have to purchase flood insurance. Oh, it absolutely does require it. Wow. I had not heard that before. Okay, well, I guess they're protecting their resilience as they want to know that you will have a way to recover if you're indeed flooded. Do they do that for other insurance as well? Just flood. Okay. Interesting. I'd not heard that.
One quick. Okay, I have a question because what you just said was very interesting. We've been seeing a lot in the news of Fort Myers Beach and things that they have to do to remove temporary or portable structures in order not to lose their discount on the FEMA flood insurance. So it seems like what you're just said, and correct me, every different section of Lee County incorporated Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Cedar Fort Myers, Bonita, may have different rating systems.
Absolutely. You got that right. You absolutely got that. And we're going to talk more about that. I have a specific slide that will show you that. Okay.
How do you distinguish between major from minor risk for private purposes, private insurance purposes?
I'm not an insurance agent. I don't know. I'm sure they have some sort of a matrix that they use to determine. But for years, it has even been, if you could get private insurance, you still had to have an NFIP policy in place first. So, okay.
Actually, this isn't a question. FEMA has ratings for where you live too. They have certain levels and maps and for
sure.
your zone. So that's one way I think that they determine your personal premium. And likewise, I think private insurers do for your homeowners.
Sure. So, right, it used to be based on the zones. It used to be based on the zones and the elevation of your structure. Now it's not so simple. They have a formula that they're using, and it takes into account different risk besides what's on the maps. In fact, it really doesn't take into account what's on the maps anymore at all. That's a NFIP building tool now, although they're still called flood insurance rate maps. I'm sure it's somewhere in the matrix, but it isn't the sole thing in the matrix like it used to be. It still is the federal requirement that if you live in one of those designated zones and you have a loan that's federally backed, then you must purchase flood insurance. So they're still used for different purposes, but not as much in the rating anymore. And it used to be if you were like my house is, 14, 15 feet above flood, your insurance would be next to nothing. It's not anymore. It's $5,000, and I don't have anything close to what's going to be flooded. I'm a floodplain manager. There's nothing down there. I'm you can drive your truck under my house. And I built on 9 feet of fill. So I definitely am up there. You can see us from Stringfellow Road. They're like, what's the crazy lady building that house over there? It's me. And my contractor, I mean, this is like, my contractor wanted to put an Ely, let's just put in the plumbing down there. We'll do it on the weekend. I'm like, no, you won't, because I'm a floodplain manager and I'll turn you in if you do. So, like, it's like, there's still a lot of, I'm shocked sometimes at what I hear about, building and stuff like that. But anyway, that was a rabbit hole. Yeah, so the flood maps, yes, they can kind of tell us risk, but honestly, they're 10 years old by the time we adopt them. That's always been an issue. And we'll see how risk rating 2.0 does when we now that we have some history with it. Is it accurately predicting, what the risk is for each one of your structures? Ah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh,
hundreds of dollars.
My pleasure. It was a fantastic project. It's my favorite project ever. I loved it. I just loved it. It was a huge challenge. And, but we also had political wind and backing. And that is so important. The electeds were 100% for coming into full compliance, playing the game nicely, and being in the CRS program, and they still are. So previous to the administration that I came in under, not so much. So, but there's lots of implications if you don't play nice in the NFIP, which includes disaster assistance. So it's not just to be in the CRS program. You have to do it anymore to just be able to get assistance. So, okay, let's move on. So we recertify every year, and every 3 to 5 years, they have a full-blown audit. And it takes a year for the audit. So you can say that as soon as they finish one audit, they're on to another. And the higher the class, the more the documentation, the longer it takes. So it is a commitment by your community. Okay, moving on. All right, so how does this work? CRS classes. It is a class system, and it goes from, it's 9 to 1, there is a 10. 10 is you do not participate in the program. So 10 is, there is a 10, but that just means you don't participate. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. So it's all about the credit points and prerequisites, but today we're just going to talk about credit points. 500 points to get in as a class 9. Go ahead. And that goes up, as Marsh said, in 5% increments as you move down the classes. So just to be more confusing, the lower the class, the better the score, and the higher the discount. So all the way up to a class 1, which means a 45% discount, but as mentioned, 35% discount in Monroe County and several other communities. Pinellas County just achieved a CRS class 2. That's the best class we have in the state of Florida. So, and they also were a Cinderella story because they came very close to being kicked out of the NFIP back in the 90s. So they have come a long, long, long way. So how do we earn points in the CRS program? We're talking all about these points. Well, how do we do it? So there are at least 120 different ways to earn credit in the CRS program. And each one of those 120 or so activities or elements under the activities have sub-elements to them where you can maybe earn a little less credit, but if you do something else. So there are a lot of ways that you can earn credit under the CRS program. But they're broken down into 4 major categories: public information, mapping and regulations, flood damage reduction, and if you can imagine, flood damage reduction has a lot of credit points thrown at it because that's what it's all about, and flood preparedness. So we even go all the way over into emergency management and what they're doing to get us ready and to get us acclimated to where we go and what we do when we do have an impending storm event coming at us and things like that. So the next slide will kind of go over each one of these activities and what the elements or subcategories are, and then it's broken down into many. If you really want some nighttime sleepy reading, you can download your very own version of the CRS manual, and you can start at page 1 and you can go to 800, and then we can give you the addendum and the other supplemental documents that go with it, and then you can learn everything there is to learn about the program. So public information, do we advise people about the flood hazard? Encouraging purchasing of flood insurance. Now, some electeds don't like this, but it's part of the program. It's an insurance program. That's what this is about. Buy your flood insurance. So we need to be telling people that, and the program says, hey, you got to have at least one publication that encourages people to buy flood insurance. And they're not saying buy flood NFIP flood insurance. They're just saying buy flood insurance. And provide information about ways to reduce flood damage. So all about the public awareness. And to also generate some data as needed by the insurance. So there's a new activity, well, it's not new anymore. It's called Activity 370, and it's all about the promotion of flood insurance. I added that, hasn't gotten too much traction, again, because the electeds are not like, hey, we can't be pushing buying flood insurance that hard. But most communities, if they do, if they have a program for talking about buying flood insurance and looking at what flood insurance is doing in the community, that's rolled into a plan called the Program for Public Information. Makes it a little softer land, and we can roll it into that and get some credit for that under the public information activities. All right, so the 400 series is all about mapping and preserving open space, protecting natural floodplain functions, and we were having some discussion about what that looks like. And some of the questions that were posed were all about, hey, are we doing things to protect flooding by, buying up more land or protecting more land and things like that? Yes, and the program has some of the most points thrown at the protecting of open space in the program. So preserving open space is absolutely one of the things that the program promotes, because wherever they're throwing a lot of points, that's what they're promoting, and they think will be the most beneficial to the NFIP program. Natural floodplain functions, even reaching down into species now. In 2021, higher regulatory standards, this is where you're going to find this. And I'm not sure, managing stormwater. So managing stormwater, that's become a huge thing. Stormwater master planning is part of the CRS program. It is a prerequisite to be better than a CRS Class 5. It's the glass ceiling for the state of Florida, because we don't write watershed master plans to meet the CRS credit criteria. They're project-based. And the CRS says, no, you have to look at not only the projects, but you have to look at full build out. You have to look like, what is this going to look like in the future? There's certain storms that you have to run. You have to put sea level rise on top of that. So there's a lot of things that we weren't doing in watershed master planning to get us to that Class 4. So actually the state of Florida got some funds several years, this has been in the works for probably 5 or 6 years, to sponsor or grant sponsor the writing of watershed master plans for communities to be able to get through that barrier to get to better classes than the Class 5, because we were just stopped at Class 5. So this initiative has really helped, because communities didn't want to spend that kind of money to go into that kind of depth. They just want to know what projects do we need to do and fund to be able to put out all these fires. So now we want to look at future conditions and all kinds of things. So that initiative is really helping get this moving. Pinellas County used it. Monroe County used it. So using the funding is a softer land for the elected officials when they've gotten a grant to do the planning. So yes. Mm-hmm.
When a developer is requesting, from the county commissioners, an okay to build, is this something that the citizens in that county can use to stop the development? because they're running rampant in the northern and central part of Florida. And nobody seems to be able to stop them because they're, private landowners and you can't interfere with that. So how does this intersect with the argument to stop development?
So the preserving open space is all of this is to encourage communities. Okay. It's to encourage communities to do things like protect the land. So to protect the land, it has to either be owned by the community, deed restricted, or it may be owned by the Water Management District, owned by the state. There's this Florida Forever. It's been named a bunch of stuff along the way, but buying up land for corridors and things like that. If it's owned by the state and under those programs, they're considered open space. So the CRS participation is not going to be a tool that you can use to stop that, but if the community participates in the CRS program, and this happens a lot out on Pine Island, I knew this before I even fell in love with Pine Island. They've got a lot of tree farms out there, right? And there's got a lot protected land, especially as it relates to low density zoning, because they've got all of these farms that can only be tree farms and so forth. So that gets some credit under low density zoning, which is actually under the preservation. So when they have people come and say, we want to develop this, we want to make a land use change, what Billy Jacoby will say, hey, Lori, can you run the calculations? If we lose this land, what's that going to cost us in the CRS program?
And I just want to piggyback off of that really quickly, Lori. On one of the questions that we came up with is, are there funding sources through CRS that can help communities acquire, let's say, mangroves, wetlands, open space, or prevent development that is available to communities?
There are no funds available under the CRS program. None. However, lots of funding available to communities has a CRS component. They want to know, it's everywhere. Every grant I read, they want to know, hey, what's your community rating service class? And the better the class, the more points you get for that particular scoring matrix for that grant. So it is becoming a part of everything. Yes.
Lori, what was the financial investment in Monroe County and also Pinellas County to get to level 1?
I don't know anything about Pinellas County, but I know that they have dynamic floodplain administrator and CRS coordinator working to full-time to implement the CRS program. In Monroe County, we were completely transparent with commission, and we did present to them the cost, or what we felt the cost was: mailings, staff time, my time. I can't tell you that figure off the top of my head, but I can go back and look at one of those presentations, because we did them annually about, okay, what's this costing us? And why we wanted to tell them what it cost us, we also wanted to tell them what it was saving. Yeah, because if you're saving $15 million a year that's going back to your citizens, and you're paying me 50, the math is pretty simple, right? It's worth the well, for most communities, it might be worth the investment. But the real investment is the staff time, inspectors' time, plans examiners' time, documentation time, because Lori Lear can walk into a community and I can direct you and I can tell you what you need to do, but I can tell you how to document it. But your community has to implement all of that. I can only help. I can only be the lead horse. I cannot politically decide, have the staff time, have the buy-ins from their directors so they have time to work on the program. So I can give you a number. I just can't give it to you off the top of my head. A ballpark, yes.
There's things that could be used further down the road, aren't they?
Oh.
For the community, for other FEMA requirements too. So that investment the community, or in my case, Lee County's making,
Mhm.
it's more than just getting its citizens' money, although that's something they
Oh,
should
absolutely.
have been concerned about and weren't too much. I don't know how many people here have a personal FEMA insurance policy. Yeah, I do too. And that policy and those points carry for 5 years too. So it's a reoccurring discount for the resident that has that policy.
Well, for Lee County, they're reassessed every 3 years, but yes.
Is it 3?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the savings is more than for 1 year's worth. And the
Oh, yeah.
savings is quite a bit of money. Mine turned out to be just under $900
Yeah, it's.
per year.
And you're correct. That's what we said at the beginning. This program is not about winning points under the CRS program. This program is about creating resilient communities and communities that are less burdensome on the NFIP program. So absolutely, you hit on my soapbox, because do nothing just for the CRS program. Unless it's going to benefit your community, don't do it. It's not going to be sustainable. You're not going to be able to do it year after year. People will adopt, okay, we're going to adopt 3 foot of freeboard in order to get more points in the CRS program. Okay, but are you going to be able post-disaster to actually sell that? Because now you put a whole bunch more people responsible for the 50% rule. Are you going to be able to maintain that? Well, we're going to get all these points. No, don't do it for the points. Do it because it's good for your community, and then reap the benefit of the points. But don't do it the other way around. You're not going to be able to keep it. It's like cumulative substantial improvement. First thing to go. Somebody tells me about that. I'm okay, when they're knocking at your door post-disaster and you're telling them you're going to look back 5 years, are you going to be able to stare them in the face and say, yeah, I'm going to do that? Probably not. And if you do, you're probably going to have electeds down your throat. So don't put it in there unless it's good for your community and you can carry it post-disaster. Yes.
How well do you find the point system and its incentives align with the actions that a community could take that legitimately best reduces flood risk, especially since communities vary from one another?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are some things, and this program is like 30 years old without much change. And they are going to be changing it. But I do think that there are a lot of the activities, and this is going to soft shoe your question, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of the activities that directly impact the community's resilience. And some of them that cost a lot of money, like mailing to the floodplain every year, they're going to throw it away, but it's part of what you have to do for a lot of the different activities. So does it align completely? Honestly, to say to you, I don't think so. In some areas, yes, and in some, not so much, but I think that's what they're trying to fix with the new iteration of the program. And we have no idea what that looks like. So I do think that that's something that they're taking into consideration. Not only that, we're not like living in the right century. Who mails out, 50,000 pieces of mail to disseminate information to property owners? I mean, they get it 3 years in a row, they can throw it in the trash. And Ogilvy did a study, actually a blind study about that. And I was part of it in Hillsborough County. And people who had gotten the letter year after year after year after year didn't recognize it, had never seen it. And they lived in the house, it was homesteaded, okay, so we spend, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars on these outreach projects, and, we're not really getting the message across, but it's still what you have to do under the program. So in some areas, not so much. And others, yes. Yeah, not everybody's homestead. There are, and we're kind of getting into the weeds, but there are like, if you're going to get credit for sending something to the floodplain, you have to know that it reached 98% of the people in the floodplain. How are you going to do that on a homestead? Because you don't know if everybody's homesteaded, right? So there's a lot of nuances like that, and that's why the program is kind of like dizzying sometimes.
Have to, there's 400. Can you pick and choose? I'll pick mapping and maybe managing stormwater, but unlike the other ones, or do you have to do everything to be compliant and to reach that 400 points?
Can you go back to the slide with the kids? Cafeteria style. Cafeteria style. The program is cafeteria style. It is meant to be a national program, pick and choose what is best for your community. You do not have to participate in every activity in order to participate in the program. That's a great question. And that's why I have this slide in there. So, yeah. All right. So let's move on to the 500 series. So your watershed master planning is falling under this 400 series. And the 500 series is all about either getting structures out of harm's way altogether, protecting structures in place, or do we have plans for floodplain management? And there are some requirements for high-risk areas with high repetitive loss where you do have to have floodplain management planning. And that's most communities in the state of Florida. So we've got a lot of different planning activities that can be credited to include now species assessments and reallocating or retrofitting floodplains type of structures where they are. I don't think we're ever going to get everyone to retreat and be out of the floodplain, at least not in the state of Florida. So what can we do to retrofit and protect in place? And then drainage system maintenance. Drainage system maintenance is definitely something that we need to speak out about in the state of Florida going into the new manual if there is going to be a drainage maintenance credit. Number of years ago, there was a reinterpretation of the manual. There was no change. There was just a reinterpretation. And Florida communities used to do really well in drainage maintenance credit because we have a lot of infrastructure and it takes a lot of hours to maintain that infrastructure. Now the program has decided it only credits maintenance for natural drainage systems. So Florida struggled with that a little bit. I am still scratching my head because most natural systems don't take maintenance. And in fact, they're protected from maintenance. So it's a little troubling for the state of Florida because we spend a gazillion dollars every year on maintaining our man-made structures so that they work properly. I would love, and this is the devil in me, I would love to say, okay, well, we just won't maintain our system this year since we don't get credit for it. You know, like why would we do that? It doesn't cause any flooding. I don't think that would work out really well. So I'm really sad that that change happened. All right, we're moving on to the 600 series, which is all about protecting life. You know, even though this is a flood insurance program, we can't ignore that, you know, this is all about keeping people safe. And we want to keep your structure safe, but we want to keep your body safe. So this is all about how we warn people and those kinds of things. So the things that your emergency management department is almost, you can get 362 points for what you're doing in your preparedness arena. So out of 500, that's a pretty good chunk of a class. So your emergency management does contribute highly to the CRS program. All right, moving on, because we got a lot of slides to go through. We're only an hour, right? Is what we're supposed to be. Okay, all right, so this is what the CRS program looks like around the nation. There's 1,502 right now. Communities in the program. That changes every May 1 and October 1. So you only change classes twice a year. And that's because it has to go into the National Flood Insurance Program's insurance manual. So it has to have lead time to be published there. So next slide. So community rating. So this is really just and kind of an overview of what the community rating system is. We've talked a lot about it already. There are 3.5 million policyholders in the United States. There are 22,000 NFIP participating communities, but CRS communities represent only 5% yet. That's more than 69% of all flood insurance policies are in CRS communities. So the communities with a lot of insurance policies are the ones that participate in the program. Basically, that's what I'm trying to relay here. All right, so this goes by FEMA region. I just want to, just so we can segue into the next. FEMA is broken up into 10 regions. We are in Region 4, and you know why Region 4 is so busy. I think Region 4 needs to be 2 regions, but they don't listen to me. So I just think it's too much. We are too at risk in Region 4. So these are all the participating communities in all the different states. So just take a gander at the numbers of participating communities in the other states, and then look here at Florida. Okay, we're a heavy hitter, so we should have a big voice. All right, next slide. So CRS communities, this is broken down by nationally and then in Region 4. So you can kind of just get a visual of what that looks like. And these are the different classes. On the left-hand side is the different classes and the percentage of those classes that are participating in that particular class. Next slide. So this is just Florida. So we're looking at just Florida here. So class 9 through 5, what does that look like? How are they distributed? We have, again, 244 participating communities. And so 238 of them fall in these categories. With obviously the class 5 through 9, it used to be class 9 was the most popular class in Florida, but you can see how much we've moved away from that. Hardly any are staying at class 9 anymore. And part of that is political pressure from your neighboring communities. They get into these competitions. So that's good for the program. Next slide. So we have one class 4, and that's because a lot of those class 4s moved to a class 3. That used to be, we only had class 4, so we've got one, and that's the golden ticket. Like when you get to the class 4, you've met those prerequisites, then you're on this like slide, then you've only got like points that you need to accumulate until you get to a class 1. And then there's a lot of stuff you have to do, like clearing out your entire floodplain. I'm not sure how many class 1s we'll have in the state of Florida, but we do have a class 2, which I told you who they were. So if you go to the next slide, so there's only 6 communities in that top tier. But class 5, which is what most of the communities are, is extremely honorable place to be, and you are definitely in the elite. So that is nothing to sneeze at. So everybody asked me once I show the slides of the top performing communities who they are. So I decided rather than to get my cheat sheet, I'm just going to put in a slide. So here they are. Here are the ones that are better than a class 4 or better. They're achieving that. All right. It's a cool place to be. All right, so everybody wants to know what happened, right? What happened? We heard a lot of news. What happened in Lee County that we were talking about losing our CRS discount. We're just gonna lay it out, right? So it shocked me. I've been doing this a long time. So it did when Billy called me, it did shock me. Well, what happened was Hurricane Ian happened. And Hurricane Ian, you can go to the next slide. This still kind of makes sense. Same as Irma. I can't hardly see the thing. So it's just kind of like, ugh. So it was the 3rd biggest disaster money-wise in the history since we've been calculating these disasters. And I would say to you that it was also extremely concentrated, right? Those dollars of damage are here. Where some of these other storms like Katrina, there was Mississippi and there are other places that we were talking about. So, it was a devastating, absolutely, couldn't even imagine that a storm could do this to this area. So, and then we had it happen, what, 3 more times? Anyway, we had 30,000 homes, and these are just guesstimates, you know, from what we can gather. Just in Lee County alone, 5,000 homes that were completely demolished by the storm. We don't have to do anything further. Fort Myers Beach, as we know, was just completely wiped out. And it caused, you know, almost $113 billion in damage. And those were both insured and uninsured losses. Okay, so property damage again. I put this in here twice, sorry about that. And the storm surge and things that we saw from that storm were just unbelievable. So that happened. No one could have been prepared for that. There is no training, there is no staff, there is no bringing in staff or help available to to be ready for something like we're going to get closer. It taught us a lot of lessons and we're going to get closer. But that was just you can't prepare for something like that. So again, all these communities that were impacted are part of the National Flood Insurance Program, and it is voluntary as well. You do not have to belong to the National Flood Insurance Program. But if you want your residents to be able to purchase NFIP insurance, then you do have to belong to the National Flood Insurance Program as a community. And you have to stay in compliance and the goal is to reduce future flood damage. So we have to build to standards. We have to look at floodplain management strategies like under what we were talking about for Activity 500. And, we got to make plans for how we're going to be better at building in the floodplain. And then we have to make sure we're in full compliance with the minimum NFIP standards. Even post-disaster Ian, the FEMA's deal with us doesn't go away post-disaster. You still have to be in full compliance. So that happened. That's why we were where we were. Because FEMA was conducting assessments, you can go to the next slide, assessments having to do with floodplain regulating. Are you even post-disaster regulating to the standards that are minimum in the NFIP? So you can go to the next slide. And the big thing that they were looking at is what we very affectionately call the 50% rule. It has to do with the amount of damage to a structure. So a structure that doesn't comply currently with the regulations. FEMA has been paying through the National Flood Insurance Program over and over and over again to repair damaged buildings that are not in compliance with the current code. And it has to stop because we cannot maintain the program if we keep paying the risk over and over and over again. At some point, we have to have enforcement of the 50% rule. If a property is damaged to 50% its value to repair it, it must be brought into full compliance in order to stay in the CRS program, because you have to be in full compliance, and then to stay in the National Flood Insurance Program, because you still have to be in full compliance. So that is what FEMA was looking at when they, a year after the storm, came to Lee County and others and said, we think you are not implementing the regulations correctly. That's what happened. Yes.
Okay, so I am so puzzled because I go to Fort Myers Beach a lot, and I'm struggling with why we would allow people to continue to build on those barrier islands when I see a lot for sale right on the water for $750,000 for a lot. And I see all these mini mansions being built again. Another storm is around the corner, and we're going to be back in the same boat. Why does this continue to happen in these areas?
Well, so that's complicated, right? $750,000 on the tax rolls. That's one of the reasons. And millions once they put a structure on that. So when you're talking about retreating or just getting out of the floodplains altogether, I mean, like what happened in Matlacha, right? There's no more land. So you can't build on the water. So, I mean, eventually Mother Nature just was like, okay, we're going to fix this. There is nothing else you can build there because there's no land and you can't build over water now. So, well, I guess you could, but you'd have to go through a lot of hoops and you couldn't insure it. And, there's lots of things. And you know, even Mount Lachey, it's historic, and historic structures in general are exempt from the 50% rule. So there are some loopholes, you know, that are going on with the rebuilding, but I think that's why there are also activities to try to protect in place, build higher, build more resilient, and so forth, because it's got its tentacles in a lot of different areas. We would, you know, as floodplain managers, we would love to see, you know, that we buy up these places, and they tried that after Sandy, actually. And the problem was they had a great program. They bought a lot of properties right on the beach, you know, turned it back to natural beach and so forth. But there were some who wouldn't sell. So now you've got, what do? You've got a level of service still that you have to maintain. You've got roads, you've got all kinds of things. While it was successful in a lot of ways, we still got people living there that would not sell. It's their private property. They don't have to. So it's complicated for sure. And I can agree with you. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the only way we're ever going to be fully protected. Yes, sir.
I think we're missing a really big point, and that is developer money.
Yeah.
Particularly in Lee County, they say, we have to sell, we have to let them build. We can't deny letting someone sell their property. Well, yeah, but you don't have to let the developer go off like drunken sailors and do what they want. And that's what this county tends to do. They will build as much as they can for as much money, because if you can build a high rise with how many condos or whatever, you're going to get a lot more money on the tax roll. And that is, you need to be going to board meetings and listening to some of their reasoning for building and developing, that it's just insane. These storms are going to get worse. You're right.
Yeah, there's.
It's seemed to me that a large part of the answer why they continue to develop there is related to Lori's point about the 50% rule. If your building is damaged greater than 50%, it must be brought up to code. So the newer buildings that are allowed on the new lots are built like a Sherman tank isn't the right metaphor, you know, like a concrete
A bunker, like a bunker?
like a bunker, or elevated, or the construction is much, much more costly. And if you buy that lot at that high price and invest in this more resistant home, then it's permissible. I'm not saying good idea. I'm not judging one way or the other. It absolutely has the environmental justice effect that only people who can afford to do that are going to live on that beach. And so that's where you get the development, like a drunken sailor issue coming in. I'm completely with you there. But the rationale is they must be built up to these really stringent codes, and so therefore it's permitted.
Yeah. And not only that, they can only get $250,000 worth of NFIP insurance. It doesn't even a dent in making them whole. So they're typically self-insured, paid cash. There's no implication for the NFIP for them. And that's a struggle for your communities too, because they hear that argument. You know, I'm self-insured. I got $50 million in the bank. Why are you bothering me about these regulations? Because they're regulated. It's because you got $50 million. It doesn't matter. The regulation still applies to you because we have to build resilient communities. Yes.
Okay.
We've hit a hot topic.
Since I
here.
have the microphone.
Okay. Yes. I'm sorry.
Didn't they change recently what the 50% is based on? I think it was previously on selling price, and now they changed it to replacement costs, something like that. I may have the two.
Yeah, they've been tampering with the definition for a while. And something unique to Lee County, the property appraiser came out with a statement and a letter that said, this is the value of the structure post Ian. Never seen that before. It's usually what's on the tax rolls as being the structure value on the tax rolls. And it is the depreciated value. It is the depreciated value, or the value that you could sell the property, just the structure, not the land, for. So FEMA got involved with that. FEMA got involved with, is this value that the tax appraiser has come up with the appropriate value to meet the definition in the NFIP for the value of that structure? And the property appraiser was able to demonstrate to FEMA that his number was a good number. And then FEMA stepped in and said, for some reason, you have to use that value. There is the opportunity to also use, if the community ordinance allows it, there is an opportunity to use a private appraisal in order to demonstrate the value of your property. So you're not stuck with the one way. You do have another way to prove the value of your structure. Most communities have that in their ordinance language. I haven't seen one that doesn't. Because it does give you, as a private citizen, the opportunity to challenge that number. Yes, absolutely. Although post-disaster, try to get an appraisal. If you want to move on with your, yeah.
And my concern when we're looking at how to make a safer, more resilient community is that we may have somebody that has some money to build out there and maybe self-insured, but we as taxpayers have to make sure they're safe when the bridges go out.
Right. Well,
And so, you know, that's another thing. If we're really looking at, did we evacuate enough people? Did we get the message out? And then our bridges collapse. And I don't, your house may be really safe, but if you don't get off that island and you trip and fall or you have a heart attack, good luck.
Yeah,
And that's not
absolutely.
keeping a community safe.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to take, take the cost of bridge repairs into when we're looking at these things so that the person out there is the one at risk, and how do they pay for the bridges and things like that instead of the whole community, because they've chosen to live there because they have the money.
Okay. Okay. We're targeting barrier islands, but there are unique situations for all different developments where that could be applied. So while we're targeting, I don't want to get too much off on barrier islands because there, you know, you could have somebody build a something out, you know, in unincorporated Lee County where there's no infrastructure and the roads, you know, would need to be repaired because they're too low. So there's all kinds of, you know, how would you get them to pay for something like that? So there are all kinds of, those kinds of implications, not even associated with, you know, even your high risk areas. So, so we are going to, I am not even halfway through my slide deck. So that's a good thing. I'm not having to sing and dance up here. But let's just real quick go through and won't take any questions. Just let me get through this. And so this is what happened. FEMA came in, they said, we don't think you're administering your 50% rule quite correctly. But there was a lot of communication that everyone who was involved with this, they were asked for documentation, they were sent documentation, there was no communication going on between FEMA. The communities were so busy, they said, well, if we don't hear from them, we must be doing everything right. And then a year later, we come in and we say, we've decided you're not doing anything right. So it was this huge surprise on a Friday afternoon, right before Easter, that we get this call that says, okay, you're out of the NFIP, you're out of the CRS program for sure, but you might have an opportunity to stay in the NFIP. If not, we're going to kick you out of the NFIP or put you on probation. What? Never happened before. So that's what happened. That's what happened in a nutshell. There was lack of communication. There was all kinds of things going on. And all those numbers will tell you how busy staff was, right? And you have some of the best staff in the country. I'm telling you, you do. I've known Billy Jacoby since she was a baby in this program, and she is a fantastic floodplain administrator, and Lee County follows the rules. So, and they've been in the CRS program forever. So anyway, going on. And the challenges posed for local officials, again, is huge. The volume of permits, you want to make people safe. You want to give them a permit to cover their roof. You want to get them back in their houses. You want to help them. But FEMA's saying, no, don't issue a permit for their roof until you do a full substantial damage determination. And not only that, we want you out on the streets looking from the street to see if you think buildings are substantially damaged. And there's a lot of disconnect between what they're expecting and the guidance that's out there post-disaster. They're rewriting the guidance again for post-disaster. The tools that they give us to use are clunky. They're just not something that communities can really effectively use post-disaster. And if you really want a great publication to read all about substantial damage, just Google the FEMA P758. It is changing, and it is changing a lot due to what happened after Ian. Okay, next. So it was a FEMA inquiry that had been going on behind the scenes, unbeknown to anyone. We thought we were giving all the documentation they needed, and it was specifically targeting substantial damage. Is damage, are you letting, if it's 50%, are you letting them rebuild it? And are you capturing all the data you need to be capturing? FEMA has a lot of data that they could be giving to communities, but the communities have to be asking for it. We didn't know we had to be asking for it. We should have been giving the insurance. We should have been giving the information when they go in and they offer folks to help them with their personal needs. They get to go in there, they get to assess. We should have had access to all that data, but we didn't, and we didn't know we had to ask for it. So there's so many things going on, and there were so many lessons learned from the state, from FEMA understands now where the problems are, and the communities understand what to do post-disaster. So in conclusion, go ahead, you can just forward through this. Community, so FEMA on that call, they said you're not in full compliance with the NFIP, so you're out of the CRS program, earliest possible time. No, we're not having any more discussion with you. You don't meet the requirement for CRS. Go ahead. So that was the initial communication, and then there was a reconsideration, lots of calls from your political constituents to say, oh no, this isn't going to fly. We have to have an opportunity to tell our side of the story. So go ahead. Your communities worked 24/7, and I was part of that team. And it just gets me choked up because they worked so hard. They worked so hard on your behalf as citizens, to say, no, we did it right. And if you want us to do it a different way, we'll do it a different way in the future. We absolutely will. And we will be ready for this the next time. So there were major plans, major things put into place, both at the state level, the federal level, and at the local level, in order to demonstrate that, yes, we did follow the rules, and we will do better in the future for the things that might have slipped through the cracks. Okay, go right ahead. I think we're almost at the end here. So here's where we land in Lee County with all the different, I promised you this, so where the classes are. We know that for Fort Myers Beach, actually, not Fort Myers Beach, Fort Myers, actually during all of this, they're gonna get a class improvement to a 6 come May 1. That's what I read in the public records for that. And then Fort Myers Beach, unfortunately, they will be a class 10 is what we are told on May 1. And they will have the opportunity to write themselves and get back in the program. But for now, they're going to have to take a sabbatical from the program and get things situated around, and then they can apply to get back in the program. And so not everyone was impacted. Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel weren't in the Fantastic Five that FEMA was looking at. So that's where we ended up. Every community, no matter what, if you have a floodplain, you can benefit from being in the community rating system. That's the big message here that I wanted to leave you with. Next slide. Because joining the program isn't going to immediately make you resilient, but for the number of years that most of the Florida communities, because it was piloted here in Florida, have been in this program, the cumulative effect, and you can go to the next slide, is the effect of having a less vulnerable community. That's what it's all about. So I didn't want to miss these slides because I wanted to leave on a real positive note that this is a program to make you more vulnerable. And if you have any more questions, I like dogs, can you tell? Next slide. And we'll leave, there's something about the conference. So we have the unique opportunity to have the Florida Floodplain Managers Conference right in our backyard this year. It's all over the state of Florida. And I can't remember the time recently that it was local. Lots of subjects, you meet lots of people. If you've got questions, they're fun. So if you'd love to participate in that, I think our director even has already sent a message to me that I passed on to Marcia that we'd love to have you. We would love, love, love to have you. It's for everyone. It's got something for everyone. If you're just dying to know more about the program, the NFIP program, all kinds of things related to that, come join us. You're not going to have this opportunity for it to be in your backyard, again, for probably many, many years. All right, next slide. Oh. So there is going to be a publicized, go to the next one. There's going to be a publicized, one of the questions that Marcia had asked me is like the longevity of the National Flood Insurance Program, what's happening with FEMA. I don't know. But I don't know. I am not, I am just as perplexed as the rest of you. So on March 4th, there's going to be a live hearing. And you're going to be able to stream it on YouTube. So you would search for this and you can watch that on March 4th. So I will be in the audience as well. I'm going to sign up for that. I'd like to know myself. So next slide. Again, I mentioned this already. You Google this FEMA P758, and you can read all about the requirements for substantial improvement and substantial damage if you really, really want to know how that's implemented. This is me and my contact information. I would be happy to answer any other questions for you all. Shoot me an email. I can't save the world. I can't save people. I can't save communities. But I can tell you all about the community rating system or answer any questions that you might have about that. With that, I really appreciate your attention and inviting me to talk about something obviously that I'm passionate about. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you all today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Lori, thank you so much. Really, a lot of good information and I think we all have a better understanding and how this affects us. And as you heard, there are a lot of questions, so you'll probably be getting some more contacts. I've been asked to clarify what's happening with the league dues system. So just quickly, we're in a transition phase that is being implemented now. So all dues are now paid to the League of Women Voters US, and they're sliding scale between recommended $75 dues, which is higher than what our dues had been in the past, $60, but you are allowed to pay a minimum of $20 for your dues. And the recommended process is to pay through a new portal that is posted on our website and also on the League of Women Voters national website. It says LWV Member Portal, I believe is the name. You click on that and go through a little bit of getting access to it, and then you can pay and also look at your information, see if they have your correct email address, phone number, address, and other information about the league. You can also still pay by check, and there are some advantages and also some disadvantages to doing that. We understand a lot of people would prefer to pay by check. It is a little bit of logistical work for us, and we're still working through locally. And then we have to send your check to national, but you can do that. The preferred method is to pay online. And you also can make contributions to the league, and that can be online through PayPal, through the League of Women Voters Lee County website, or also you can write a check to League of Women Voters Lee County, and we can accept that. We don't have to send that to the national. I forgot to mention, when you pay your dues to national, the local league gets 20% of whatever amount of dues you pay. So that's a fixed amount paid back to us. It's a change. We used to collect and pay them. Now they collect and pay us the 20%. And you can also still donate to the League of Women Voters Education Fund, and that is at this point is by check to us. So if you have any questions about how you can contribute, we'd be glad to answer that. And if you have any questions about your membership, we can answer those as well. Did I get everything covered? Any questions? Okay. Again, April 5th, we will have a member-only meeting here. We will have our annual business meeting as well as the Judicial Study Consensus Program. And the time frame will be approximately 9 to 1 on that day. And let's see what else I need. I'm sorry, what? Okay. Coffee cups go into the kitchen, into the dishwasher, just a reminder on that. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating and also giving us your extra time. And we look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. I know that as a community, Lori has given us a vision of what we can achieve based on the great examples that she shared with us. And I think we all have clarity about what we can advocate for from an informed perspective. And that's what the league is all about, is, citizen participation from informed perspective. So let's take our newfound knowledge and build on that. Thank you so much, Lori. I'm sure we'll be reaching out with our questions. Thank you.